So this is his response.
Sure. Ladies and gentlemen, we are all aware of the challenges that have bedeviled the education sector since the NPP administration took over the reins of government nearly 8 years ago. Clearly, our basic schools have been neglected. The sector has been characterized by poor implementation of reforms that have not been properly thought through, changes in syllabus without accompanying textbooks and other learning materials, poor infrastructure, lack of furniture for students to use. As for the implementation of free SHS, the least talked about it, the better. Just last week, I had the privilege of meeting a cross-section of leaders of the Conference of Heads of Assisted Secondary Schools, CHAS, who lamented the poor implementation of the free SHS and its effects on quality education delivery in the country. I'm aware that as key stakeholders, the NPP government has failed to consult you on many policies that they are currently implementing. The NDC is different. As a social democratic party and as an ally of the unions, we believe in participation. This is a mark of good governance as it helps shape policies to make them more responsive to the needs of the citizens. Today's meeting is yet another demonstration of the fact that the NDC is always ready to listen to you and work with you to improve our educational sector. The NDC recognizes all unions in the education sector, NAT, NAGRAT, CCT, TEWU, and all the other institutions as key stakeholders in quality education delivery in this country. Our party has always taken and will continue to take the inputs of the unions into account when formulating education policies. That is why in 2020, NDC People's Manifesto in section 7.2, paragraph 6, under the heading Providing Globally Competitive and Quality Education, we stated, and I quote, "Furthermore, the next NDC government will usher in a new dawn for teachers through restoring the dignity of teachers and making them integral partners in national policy reforms." It means that any reform we want to introduce, we're going to make sure that the teachers are part of discussing and implementing those reforms. In line with that recognition, I met with the pre-tertiary education teachers unions, NAT, NAGRAT, and CCT. The inputs you made were taken into consideration in our 2020 People's Manifesto. In December 2023, I again caused an arrangement to be made for me to engage with you. Unfortunately, you requested to be allowed up to February 2024 to present a common position document to guide all political parties in their engagements with you. I'm happy that you have codified your concerns into a document titled Demands to the Political Parties on Education Delivery in Ghana for Consideration and Incorporation into their 2024 manifestos. This has paved the way for our engagement today. It's on the basis of that your document. And so I'm going to respond to some of the issues in the document and say what our position on those issues are. Going through the concerns presented by you in the document, I realize that they significantly reflect the work already done by our education committee. Your demands thus validate the quality of work of our education committee and what they put into the research that is going to go into our manifesto. That said, echoing the need to improve quality teaching and learning and existing infrastructure is key and reflects what I've said at many fora during my Building Ghana tour across the country. Many of the concerns you have raised in the document are germane and relevant and achievable in collaboration with you. Others, I believe, need further engagement, given the limited fiscal resources available due to the mismanagement of our economy by the current government. So now let me take the issues one after the other. And the first, the use of first language as a medium of instruction from KG to Basic 3 sits well with our own policies. This was especially so under Prof. Jane Nana Opoku-Agyeman as the then Minister of Education. She advocated this policy directly. This policy will be considered alongside the training of more teachers in the local major Ghanaian languages to make its implementation effective. The NDC agrees with you on the need to establish libraries in the basic schools to inculcate the culture of reading in the pupils. This is necessary not only for knowledge but also for pleasure, which is gradually diminishing in the basic schools. We complain that our children are not reading. but they're not reading because they don't have access to the books. And so that is something we'll look at. The next is the school environment. The need to ensure the provision of relevant textbooks, workbooks, and teaching and learning materials were vigorously pursued under my administration. And I remember that under Jane Nana, we were able to supply all the 4 core textbooks to the children at the basic level, including the teachers. And so everybody had the books. Distribution of school uniforms was also done alongside the distribution of textbooks. Presently, the distribution of textbooks is a critical issue at the basic school level, and I'm not surprised that you have raised the issue, because my understanding is that since the new curriculum came almost 4 or 5 years ago, the children have not got the textbooks to be able to instruct them in the new curriculum. Even the teachers do not have the textbooks. The next is financing of education at the basic school level. This is another major challenge. The NDC will ensure the timely disbursement of capitation grants to the schools and the education directorates to ensure effective management of the schools. Today we have an unprecedented arrears of capitation grant of 6 terms. It has never happened in our history. For 6 terms, the schools have not received their capitation grants. Financing of basic schools, I agree with you, should be needs-based and resource-based. We will uncap the GET fund and decollateralize it. The GET fund is not only capped. You talked about uncapping it. It's not only capped, it has also been collateralized. And the money has been taken in advance and spent on model STEM schools. And so, at the expense of all the infrastructure that is taking place in all the secondary schools, administration blocks, dining halls, dormitories, and science laboratories and all that, this government has taken almost about 60% of the GET fund and built STEM schools across the country and left the rest of the schools projects to stall. So apart from capping the GET fund, it has also been collateralized. And so we will uncap the GET fund and decollateralize it in order that the full remit of the GET fund levy will go into education financing. You will find this in our manifesto, I'll show you. The provision of free sanitary pads for female learners in both basic and senior high schools was initiated under the SWAL NDC administration. If you remember, our opponents now in government mocked us and called it the pad loan. For you, the unions, to have raised this as an issue in the concerns that you have presented to us means that our policy on sanitary pads was well thought through and needs to be looked at again. The NDC policy of infrastructure development will again be pursued vigorously to decongest the large class sizes. Abandoned infrastructure in the basic and senior high schools and TVET schools, including the famous E-blocks, will receive priority attention under a new NDC administration. The need to review and improve upon the free SHS TVET policy is no longer debatable. And Angel just mentioned it. We're happy we're on the same wavelength with regards to that. It is a must that we look at the implementation of free SHS again through stakeholder engagements to address the numerous challenges and strengthen its positives. It is thus not surprising that you have incorporated it into the document that you have presented us, which I call the Teachers Manifesto. We're going to mainstream TVET and STEM into all secondary schools. We don't believe that STEM and TVET should be standalone in special secondary schools. We must mainstream them through all the secondary schools. And so in this regard, we will revamp the science resource centers in order that clusters of schools can use those centers. Luckily for us, the E-blocks have 4 laboratories in every E-block, and those laboratories are going to be used for TVET and STEM education. The imperative of the Free SHS Secretariat being supervised by the Education Directorate is our considered view. The Education Service, which is an implementing agency, has the capacity to implement the Free SHS policy. So we do not agree on a standalone Free SHS Secretariat. We think that it must be integrated into the Education Service as an implementing agency. The NDC will therefore integrate the Free SHS Secretariat into the Education Service Directorate and not have them exist as separate entities. I announced to the CHAS representatives last week that we will decentralize the school feeding program and return the responsibility for feeding the students to the schools. This will not only boost the local economy because the schools will buy the food locally, but it will also ensure that the students receive more nutritious food than they currently receive today. Then the next is the PTA. Currently, the Parent Teachers Association, especially at the SHS level, have been rendered very weak, dysfunctional, and ineffective. We believe that PTAs are a vehicle for community and stakeholder participation in the work of the schools. And if you look at the whole world, they are moving towards parents having a say in the administration of the schools. Instead, the implementation of the free SHS has weakened the PTAs and moved them out of taking part in the work of the schools. The NDC government will therefore work towards restoring stakeholder participation through the PTAs in our education system at all levels. We will also work aggressively to expand space at the secondary level in order to decongest the classrooms and abolish the double track system that has eroded vacation and rest periods for teachers. In this regard, as I stated earlier, we'll prioritize the completion of abandoned infrastructure in existing secondary schools and the completion of the abandoned E-blocks. We would also identify high population areas for siting of additional community-based schools, including on the lands of existing schools. Now let me explain that. There are high concentration areas of high population concentration where there's a high demand for secondary education. And you find that there's only one school in the catchment area. Meanwhile, the school has extra land that is being encroached upon. And so the idea is that we'll place one of the community-based schools on the extra land of that school so that you have two secondary schools on the same site that would be catching the students in that whole area. We did the Kwabinya one, if you remember, E-block. The day I went to commission it, the school was full. We did the Fafaha one. The day we were going to commission it, the school was full. And so if we put additional schools, let's say on West Africa Secondary School sites, it serves the whole of Adenta and Medina and other areas. So we'll have two secondary schools instead of one. And that would help to absorb more of the children. And because it's a community school, the children can stay at home and go to school every day. And decongesting the schools would also, help us to abolish the double track as fast as possible so that we can go back to the situation where the children all go to school at the same time and we're sure of the number of contact hours they are having with their teachers through the 3 terms of school. We'll go back to the 3 terms that we're used to, so that children will all go together. Heads of schools will be given a free hand to take charge of their schools, and they'll be held to account for the performance of their students. They cannot do this under harassment and intimidation and resource constraints as is being experienced currently. The NDC government will therefore resource the schools and restore the dignity of the school heads and their teachers. For incentive packages for teachers in deprived areas, the NDC will work with the unions and the GES on a policy to map out deprived communities and underserved communities. A comprehensive data on teachers working in such communities will be compiled so that those teachers can be compensated for the deprivation they suffer in such areas. Like Angel said, we came out with a policy that we must give incentives so that teachers can go to schools that are considered deprived. But they won't go there unless you give them, some sweetener. But we never implemented it because we couldn't come up with an agreement on which schools are deprived and which are not. But if we're able to go past that, we should be able to identify and map out teachers who are working in deprived areas and then give them that incentive. A comprehensive data on teachers in such areas should be gathered so that teachers can be compensated for the deprivation they suffer for serving in those areas. The NDC is in solidarity with teachers in decrying the current manipulation, abuse, and wrongful punishment of teachers by this NPP administration. It is not surprising that you have captured this amongst your concerns. These harassments, abuse, and the threat of an actual use of transfers, repostings, as a tool for coercing and punishing teachers, school heads, directors, and union leaders who criticize the system or criticize government will be halted by the NDC. And as I said, 7th January will be the second Independence Day for teachers and headmasters. You'll be free to speak your minds without fear that you will be transferred to Bunkurugu or Bole or Mandari or Makango or somewhere like that. The NDC will vigorously ensure not only prompt recruitment of newly trained teachers, but also prompt payment of their salaries and any arrears that accrue. Auto loans and housing schemes. I've announced this already, that we will engage with your unions and see how we can bring counterpart funding to bear with what you are doing already, so that we can expand access to money for loans, auto loans, and housing schemes. There will be engagement with teachers' unions on how we can work out a collaboration to develop modalities on these schemes. Despite the current economic mess that the country has been plunged into, I believe that with the right conversation and collaboration with stakeholders, a workable plan can be crafted. With housing, teachers who have a working life of between 15 to 20 years or more ahead of them will be able to take low-interest mortgages indexed in CDs to acquire affordable houses in locations of their choice. And so they will decide where they want the house, built, and they'll be given a mortgage. The mortgage will be in CDs. The problem with previous mortgages is that they are indexed in dollars, and as the dollar, deteriorates, the price of the mortgage goes up. Licensure exams as a standalone will be abolished. Licensing of teachers will be integrated into the final year requirements of the colleges of education. So the teachers will come out of the college of education fully licensed, so that they don't have to struggle to take another licensure exams. Teacher deployment. Teachers need to be deployed and posted equitably across the country, and this should be done based on the needs of the districts and the schools. In the view of the NDC, we will reform the current centralized posting of teachers from the GES headquarters and revert to the deployment of teachers by regional and district directorates of education. So this will create a better spread of teachers across the country rather than the current centralized model. And we're going to, if we do this, it will enable us to be able to also decentralize. We're looking at that, but that's the finance committee, looking at decentralizing the accountant general's department so that we can have regional and district treasuries that know who are on the payroll, so that if a teacher leaves, it's possible to know that the teacher is not there, instead of the current system where teachers leave and 6 months after their salaries are still being paid into their accounts, and then after that government goes chasing them and with prosecution if they don't refund the monies. So we're looking at all that. We're going to make a policy that all new schools that are built at the basic level come with accommodation for teachers, come with toilet facilities, come with solar lighting, and borehole for water supply. If government wants to build a school, it will factor all that in so that the teachers have a place to live. There will be a solar panel on the roof so that at least lights can be on in the night. They will have toilet facilities, and they will also have water supply. In conclusion, your concerns as teachers' unions cannot be ignored. The education sector is the most populated public sector, comprising teachers, students, education support staff, and parents. Meeting your needs, therefore, amounts to helping to address the needs of a significant percentage of our population. The Education Committee of the party will, after today's engagement, be mandated to continue to engage with you. Considering the current mess that has been created in the education sector by the current administration, the NDC government, in collaboration with all stakeholders, will develop a robust, relatable, and achievable policy to address these issues. And working closely with you, the teachers' unions, to achieve this objective will be my priority. Finally, I pledge to make copies of our manifesto available to you, the unions, after it has been finalized, so that you can follow the implementation of our policies and evaluate them accordingly.
Well, so that's former President John Mahama. And thank you.